Sal.
Hey, Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day. All Bills, all the time. And now Matt Bovee and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
Well, officially the offseason now for every NFL team following the Super Bowl yesterday. What a dominant win it was for the Philadelphia Eagles. They win, 40-22, the final. And I think it softened the blow for a lot of Bills fans, Sal. I think a lot of Bills fans were probably hate watching the game, and then the way that it was going in the first half or so probably made people feel at least a little bit better.
Yeah, I was never going to boycott it. Can't do that. And the jobs that we have professionally nor personally would have boycotted it. It's the Super Bowl. I do remember the last two Super Bowls. I definitely watched it, as you said. This one wasn't necessarily the case. I was interested because I really was intrigued by the matchup. It made it way easier to watch as the game was going on, though, because, if you wanted to see the Chiefs lose, it was pretty apparent right away that could happen. And then obviously things just started snowballing. Do you remember the commercial that used to air right after the Super Bowl? They did it for like 2 years and they stopped it, maybe even only 1 year. And it was basically all these fans after the game going, "The sun will come out tomorrow." And they had, and it said at the end, everybody is 0-0 again.
Yeah.
And that's what it said. And that's what I feel like today, which is it sucked not being there for the Bills. Yes, no doubt about it. It sucked for us, Matt, not being there and covering it professionally. No doubt about it. But I think there's anything to at least distract you from what you were upset or angry or miserable about. It's this thing over here that is the Kansas City Chiefs getting blown out on the football's biggest stage.
Yeah, we'll talk obviously coming up in a second about what we learned about, the Bills and how they compare to the two teams and where they go from here. But we do have to give some flowers to Nick Sirianni. I mean, he's a Western New York native. His family has been very influential in high school football and just football in general in the Western New York Section 6 community. So shout out Nick Sirianni, because I should say it correctly. Nick Sirianni. That is how most
I wasn't going to correct you. Because I know that you have it said different ways in your family.
So yeah, exactly. So Nick Sirianni is how everybody will pronounce his name nationally. We have family that pronounces it Sirianni. And then several years ago, I went and did a story on him and essentially found out that I think we are distantly related, and it's just pronounced differently kind of on our side compared to his side. But, his brother Jay has been very involved in Section 6 football. His dad, Fran, used to be the coach and was, also very involved. So just like a really cool local connection. And kudos to him, because a lot of people criticized him as a coach. And now he's been to the Super Bowl 2 of his first 4 years and just won one.
Yeah, I've gotten to know Jay very well over the last several years. I shot Jay a text on Sunday morning, and I just said, "Hey, man, good luck to you and your family. I wish I was there covering the Bills against your brother today." And I know that it means the world to them to see Nick on top of the NFL world, of course, hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. It is a great Western New York football family, and one very cool part about the family as well. Randomly, Jay and his side of the family, they actually like to vacation where I used to live, in a small town called Englewood, Florida. Okay. And there's a little tiny ice cream shop there. Hey, they're not paying us for the advertising. I'm just going to say it's called Lickety Split. Okay. It's on Route 776 in Englewood, Florida. And Jay Sirianni and his family used to always like to go to Lickety Split. And I think Nick's been there. Well, guess what? Go have all the ice cream you want from Lickety Split on 776 in Englewood. Very cool. Also had a great story from Andrew Filipponi from our Odyssey sister station in Pittsburgh. He was on WGR last week, and Andrew told the story of how Nick got into coaching after he was playing football at Mount Union, because he would play basketball at some place near Chautauqua Lake where there was a rec center or something, where there was a vacation spot. And Todd Haley apparently would also go there to vacation with his family, and they were playing basketball. And Todd Haley, they met each other through playing basketball in Chautauqua Lake. And Todd Haley said, "If I ever get a job in the NFL as a head coach, I'm going to hire you." And that was his first job with the Chiefs, with Todd Haley.
That's so crazy. It's incredible for how big football is and how many people play it and coach it, how small it can ultimately be. I mean, I just downloaded the press conference from this morning, because the coach and the Super Bowl MVP talk, and you see the commissioner of the NFL, Roger Goodell, handing the Lombardi Trophy to Nick Sirianni, the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, both from Jamestown. And you're like, this is crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
Just like the local connections here. So obviously that's a very cool part of the story. But I don't know about you. I watched the game, and the entire time I'm thinking about how the Bills would stack up to the Eagles and how there is one big thing that they must do this offseason. And I think it was incredibly evident in the game we watched on, Super Bowl Sunday.
Isn't it like Groundhog Day though, Matt? Talking about this every year, because hasn't this been the thing we've been talking about for the last 4 years, assuming you're going to say pass rush, getting to the quarterback, getting Patrick Mahomes down. And it was evident right away that the Eagles just had the horses to do it up front without blitzing. I read a stat today from Next Gen Stats that said
they didn't blitz.
They didn't blitz at all. And it's like the 42nd time ever a team has never blitzed in a game, like any game. And since charting this, and yet they were able to get 6 sacks on Patrick Mahomes. They were able to disrupt him all day. The Chiefs could do nothing, and there's no doubt. Look, it's not that easy though. You can't just snap your fingers and become the great pass rush team. 31 other are saying the same thing this morning as the Buffalo Bills. They're all doing that. How do we get that? And some are better at others. Look, the Houston Texans got to Patrick Mahomes a little bit the week before they played the Bills. They have a couple of really excellent pass rushers, but I do think that that's got to be the main focus. You and I have been on the same page here, and I'll say it again. I think you do whatever it takes if you can try and get Myles Garrett.
Yeah. Do you feel only that way, though, about Myles Garrett? Because there's other names that are going to be popped up and talked about. So it's not just Myles Garrett. It's Max Crosby. It's Trey Hendrickson. It's Micah Parsons. I agree that of the 4, Myles Garrett would be the most impactful immediately. But like Micah Parsons is a young player.
Yep.
If there's a chance he's available, I think you're probably willing to pay just as much, if not more, than it would cost to get Myles Garrett just because of how young he is. Then Max Crosby. I'm a big Max Crosby fan. I feel like he would be a massive addition for the team. Trey Hendrickson is the one that feels the least likely just because he's already in the AFC with another contending team. I don't know why they would trade him to you. But then I also think about the Bills trading Stephon Diggs to the Houston Texans and it not mattering because it was just about the return, not about where they were going. So do you feel that way just about Myles Garrett, or do you feel that way about kind of the entire group?
I only feel the do whatever it takes to get about Myles Garrett. I do feel strongly that if you can, even if we're going to sit here and go, you know what, they may have overpaid, I'm not going to blame them. Look, it's the same thing I said about Von Miller just today on the radio doing my show, which is how many times have we heard, well, it didn't work out when you went after Von Miller. Look, I mean, they took a swing. They weren't trying to get Von Miller for 6 years. They had to pay him 6 years to do it. And they knew they would have the overpay of down the road, but it was to try and win a Super Bowl in the window of the next couple of years. And he was great that first year until he got hurt, and it didn't work out ultimately. And they are still going to pay for that, no doubt. But I give him credit for swinging. I want him to swing. I want him to take a shot at one of these guys. And it's interesting. I haven't dug much into, the Parsons side of it. I don't know if that's something that's out there now that he could be available. I know a lot of people want Max Crosby. I love Max Crosby too. He is younger than Myles Garrett. He's also not quite as good. He's very, very good.
Oh yeah,
but
definitely.
He's not a generational talent like Myles Garrett, but you could definitely add a guy like that to make your pass rush so much better. And if it's not what the Eagles did is special though. They have like a whole front of guys, right? Yeah. Like who are you going to block? The Bills, for them to do it, it would almost be like you got to get one guy, which you can do, to have everybody else open up to concentrate on one guy. But what the Eagles did is just special, and you're just not going to replicate that, especially just you doing it out of thin air.
Yeah, and that brings you to the other end of it, though. Is it more valuable to have the picks that they have and to be using those picks to almost overhaul the defensive line? And I think you can make the argument either way. I still think it's better to prove for an established player because you know what you're getting. And I don't know how much I trust the Bills front office to hit because, we've talked about this on the last several episodes. I know it is a bit of a crapshoot, but especially early picks, the Bills have not had a great success rate on. But there is something to be said with 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. You could really overhaul your defensive line if you drafted a defensive tackle, an edge rusher, and another defensive tackle, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, you've got the assets now there. They just better hit. Do you feel like that is a viable option, or it's a better option to go use those picks and get somebody who you're getting from?
I think it's the latter right now. This is not a team that's trying to still build for the future. Yeah, you still want to do that. There is no guarantee that these guys will hit. You have a proven guaranteed commodity in any of those 4 players that you mentioned. You go get it if that's the case. It does remind me of the Stephon Diggs situation a few years ago. Now, excuse me, sorry, I've been a little sick, but I know people will say, well, they could have had Justin Jefferson. Of course. I mean, even the Eagles, by the way, they drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. No one knew how great Justin Jefferson would be. Yeah. But what the Bills said was, we need a guy now for Josh Allen. Like, we don't know what that wide receiver is going to come and when that's going to happen. We need a guy now. That's why it does remind me of, I'd rather have that, which at the time, sure. Would you rather have Justin Jefferson now? Of course, but nobody knew what was going to happen and where it was going to fall. At the time, it was the right move for the Bills to trade for a guy like Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I think especially like Myles Garrett would be such an impactful. It would cost so much, and you don't even know if they're going to trade him. Right? They have said that they don't want to. I feel like that's easy to say, and if somebody is walking down Radio Row and talking to every person available saying that he wants to be traded, you probably have to trade that player. But I do think that Myles Garrett would be at the top of the list of just immediate impacts. Micah Parsons would be the second most intriguing just because of the age and because of the just pure pass rushing ability that he has. But I think the thing that was evident watching the Super Bowl is it's not going to be just about one guy. They need to improve their interior defensive line. They need somebody who can play next to Ed Oliver. They need somebody who is going to be able to take over a game. They do not have that. And it might just be one of those things where the sum needs to be greater than the individual pieces. If you go get a guy like Myles Garrett, that's not the case. He is going to be your guy. And then everybody else is going to kind of ride after him. But they have to drastically improve their defensive line because I'm not saying you can replicate what the Eagles were able to do, but the Bills could do nothing. And that is, I think, the thing that's most concerning. It was if you're a Bills defensive coach, or if you're just like on that side of the ball, I think yesterday, Super Bowl Sunday, was a pretty humbling thing to watch because you couldn't have any success against the Chiefs. And the Eagles completely took over the game. I mean, the game was done before it even got to the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I do think there's something to be said for how they covered on the back end as well. They were able to not only get to Patrick Mahomes with 4, but part of the reason was because as they had more people without blitzing out there, I mean, they did a really good job of covering. And, give credit to Vic Fangio, give credit to the Eagles. I will say I also learned something, I think, a little bit about the offensive side and what the Eagles did. There were a couple times they went deep and made plays down the field. I think that's been missing from the Bills offense, right? Like, you see the Devontae Smith touchdown. You see the A.J. Brown touchdown. These are Dotson. These are the ones you gotta. I think you got to be able to take your shots. I'm not saying the Bills never did, but it just seemed like that was lacking and missing. And maybe what it takes is to beat a team like the Chiefs. When you get your shot, you take one down the field. They did, of course, in the championship game. They did throw one to Matt Collins. I get it. I just didn't think it was consistent enough this year.
Yeah, well, once again, it goes to the weapons. And I think that there's going to be people. Jalen Hurts deserves so much credit for what he's able to do. But I hate seeing I don't want to make this a Jalen Hurts thing, but you see posts about, well, Jalen Hurts was able to do what Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen were never able to do. And I understand that is correct. He did. Jalen Hurts has A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Saquon Barkley, and Jahan Dotson, and an amazing offensive line. A.J. Brown, first-round pick, elite wide receiver. Devonta Smith, first-round pick. Jahan Dotson, first-round pick. Saquon Barkley, second overall pick in the first round. They are loaded with talent, and I think that's another discrepancy where they have playmakers all across the board that the Bills just simply do not have. Like, they had the best playmakers by far in the game between the Chiefs and the Eagles.
I've heard so much ad nauseum about how much better the Chiefs are. As you know, we've talked about this, drafting the Bills. The Eagles are the standard for drafting right now. They've done an amazing job. All those guys are draft picks by them. Josh Sweat, by the way, Josh Sweat's a free agent, right? Look what I mean. That's another guy. I don't know. I mean, his market probably soars after this game. Yeah, he has 33 sacks over the last 4 years, though. I mean, this is a guy that, to me, he's probably a little bit better of a pass rusher than a guy like Greg Rousseau, obviously AJ Epinesa. But it might be a little too much, too rich for my blood for something like that. But I will say, like, one thing it did expose a little bit was, we've talked about this, my position on the Chiefs. Yes, they've hit some really great draft picks. I'm not taking that away. They also have kind of neglected their offensive line, and they have not hit. They had Creed Humphrey, but they have not been able to figure out their offensive line drafting very much lately. And I think that's really hurt them yesterday.
Yeah, it did. But it also kind of shows how bad or how inconsistent the Bills' defensive line was, because that's the same offensive line that controlled the game against the Bills 2 weeks ago. And the Bills just had no answers. And like, that's the thing that's the most concerning. I think about yesterday, there's obviously, there's like a lot of people who had bad days, right? Obviously the Chiefs have a bad day, a terrible day for Drake if you're into music and you're into like music beefs and things like that. But I think about Greg Rousseau. Greg Rousseau is a player who is supposed to be able to take over a game. And in the Chiefs, like, no-showed, basically. Daquan Jones has been a good player for the Bills, but didn't do nearly. The only player on the defensive line for the Bills that I remember making an impact in the championship game was Ed Oliver on a specific play, and then Jordan Phillips at the end of the game with the sack. mean, those are 2 plays. It didn't feel like they could get even close to making Patrick Mahomes' day.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But I will say this. One really interesting total opposite for the Chiefs was they did a lot of quick game and RPO against the Bills. Like they got the ball out of Mahomes' hands fast against the Bills, which does mitigate and really makes it harder for those guys to make an impact. You're not wrong. They didn't make an impact, but it makes it harder. They didn't do that in this game, partly because they went with 4 and didn't blitz and they were covering. So it's like Mahomes gets it and there's nowhere to throw to because everything is blocked up and then he has to start moving around.
Yeah, and the other thing too is no Christian Benford changed the way the Bills wanted to play defense. Now the Chiefs carved up the Bills on the first drive when Christian Benford was still on the field, but that's also not an outlier. That's what they did against the Broncos. They gave up a touchdown on the first drive, the Ravens, and then they tend to kind of tighten things up after that first drive. So I do think that certainly plays a factor. But yeah, to me, I think the Super Bowl is even more evidence of this. The entire offseason is going to be really about the defensive line. You need to get more playmakers too. They need another wide receiver for sure, but I think the defensive line will become kind of the biggest thing that we talk about. So that kind of puts a bow on the Super Bowl. Anything else Super Bowl related? No, I think we're good. But this is also the first podcast since Josh won MVP. We haven't talked about that since that happened. Initial thoughts. Obviously, I'm sure Bills fans were thrilled, as they should be. This is a huge, huge deal. And, I think we both thought he should be the MVP, and it looks like we both feel like they got it right.
Very close vote, as it should be. Both these guys are very deserving. I've had the position, and I believe you have, that if Lamar had won it, sure, you'd bum you out and be like, oh, man, Josh, maybe deserved it. But I don't think either of us would have had a problem with Lamar winning it. The guy was sensational this year. He had an amazing season. But I think when you truly take the heart of what value means, most valuable, you have to parse that with who had the best statistics. And the guy who had the best statistics doesn't always have to be the most valuable player in the league. And this year it wasn't. Just like last year, it basically wasn't, with Lamar Jackson winning MVP. So I was so happy for Josh. Obviously, now he has that individual piece of hardware, right? That's eluded him. We all know that he'd rather have a Super Bowl and Lombardi, but Lamar Jackson has 2 of those. Patrick Mahomes, 2, I think now. He has 2 MVPs, I think.
That sounds right. I think
he has 2. But either way, now he has that piece. And I'm not saying it has to relieve any pressure from him necessarily, but I think it was clearly a goal of the team, the organization, the guys in front of him. They wanted to get him that because they believe that he is the league MVP. And I'll go back to August, Matt. We said this. Many people did, but we said it here. We said, look, if there's a year where Josh going to win MVP, it's this year with this cast. Like if he could take this team to deep in the playoffs with this group, he's got to be the MVP. And it did turn out that way. And it was great for him.
It's a legacy award. The MVP has solidified Josh Allen's legacy as not just a great quarterback, an elite, difference-making, legendary quarterback. One MVP is half of the ticket to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He doesn't even probably need the other half, honestly, at this point in his career with what he's accomplished to get there. But think about all of the different players who we talk about of like, hey, is that guy a Hall of Famer? Is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer? Is Phillip Rivers a Hall of Famer? Is Cam Newton a Hall of Famer? Is Matt Ryan a Hall of Famer? You know why guys like Matt Ryan and Cam Newton are in the conversation? Because they have MVPs. Guys like Eli are in the conversation because they have the Super Bowls. If you get both, you're going. You're a Hall of Famer. But because of the statistical dominance Josh has had early in his career, and now the fact that it's paired with an MVP, the guy, I think, is destined to go to the Hall of Fame. And I think that this is a legacy award. I think it also makes the year a bit more special and memorable for the fan base. You have the carpet pulled out from under you of coming up so close and then still falling short. At least now you've got the MVP to hang your hat on. You could be like, oh yeah, that's the year Josh won MVP. Like, it's a big deal. It hasn't happened since 1991. So it's very well deserved. And I also think, given what he accomplished, it was the right decision. I hate some of the comments that I've seen out there of like, oh, it was given to him or it's a pity award. I think that is complete and utter nonsense. The guy's leading receiver in the AFC Championship game was Mac Hollins. He had them 3 points away from a trip to the Super Bowl with that supporting cast. What he did this year was remarkably impressive, and it was his best year yet.
I think it's embarrassing by some of the national media who cannot seem to understand or grasp the nuance of value and value versus, statistics. And I've said before, hey, I'm fine if you want to make the most valuable player, take it away and just call it most outstanding. Now we're having a different conversation, but that's not the case because value is so subjective. That's fine. he wasn't the most outstanding player this year. Maybe
Uh-huh.
Saquon Barkley was, in my eyes, honestly, like
Sure.
the year he had, or Lamar Jackson could have been. But there is a difference between value. You tweeted it out the other day. I loved it. You said there's a lot of people are, debating, well, how could you do first team all pro, but a different guy for MVP? And what you said is right. It's two totally distinct, separate honors and awards.
Yes, absolutely. And it's incredible that for some reason it felt like one had to go with the other. And it's just because it's happened doesn't like consistently doesn't mean that it's right. There have been instances where I'm sure that made the most sense. The best statistical player should be the MVP. But in this instance, there's another layer to it. And it's the exact same thing that happened last year.
Mm-hmm.
The exact same thing. So it's incredible that literally 12 months ago, Lamar Jackson had a very underwhelming statistical season by his standards, but was the MVP. And then for some reason, 12 months later, that gets thrown out the window. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. I do think that Josh deserved it. And if you think that Lamar deserves it, you are totally within your right to feel that way. But don't say that it was just a give me or like good for you. You deserved it at some point in your career. Because that to me is BS.
27 of the 50 voters voted Josh Allen number one. He did get a third place vote. Lamar got a fourth place vote. Otherwise,
that's a joke.
Otherwise, they split 27 to 23. First place vote in favor of Josh. Here, I'll give you a thought on this. It's great, like what you just said about all pro and MVP. I actually think that maybe we should have a little bit more variation in these two things because they are distinct. Maybe this is the year that people start to say, hey, I don't have to vote for the same guy because they are two different awards. Actually, instead of saying it the other way, which is, oh my God, they're never different. Why are they different this year? Maybe we should say, why haven't they been different in years past?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a very good point. And I just think that you can make the argument like Lamar had a better statistical season and should have got. I hate the fact that people are like, it almost feels like you're giving I don't like that argument, but I do feel like if you have the season that Lamar had, you should be rewarded with something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have the season that Josh had, you should be rewarded with something. And they both got what I think made the most sense for them to get. Lamar getting first team all pro made sense because of what he did in his stats. Josh getting most valuable player makes sense because the definition of the award, most valuable player, I feel like he more adequately checked the boxes than Lamar did. And it's a debate and I hate what it turned into because of people trying to tear the other one apart. And that's nonsense. But I do think, hey, Bills Ravens next year, give it to me week 1 on Sunday Night Football.
I love that you said that.
Give it to me to start the season just so we can get this out of the way early.
Oh man, that'd be great. So a couple things about the MVP. First of all, the award show. We also know Damar Hamlin did not win comeback player of the year. He was 4th in the voting. And Joe Brady was 5th in the voting.
For assistant coach of the year. And then Deion Dawkins did not win Walter Payton Man of the Year.
No, Sean McDermott actually finished 6th. He was just outside the top 5. That's why he wasn't a finalist for coach of the year. But really cool. I know you and I have both gotten to know Josh's family a little bit over the years. We always see them on the road. Josh's dad is singing at a karaoke bar somewhere on the road sometimes. He's got a great voice. It was really cool to see them a part of it. His fiance, Haley Steinfeld, she was there as well. Very cool speech. And of course, do good, be good. God bless, go Bills. That's going to be on like every bumper sticker and t-shirt in Western New York for the next 10 years. Oh
yeah. The t-shirt business was buzzing the next day with people trying to get that up as quick as humanly possible. I posted that it's going to be on the signs outside of churches across Western New York because it feels like it will be basically really, really cool from just him as a guy. It's probably the question I get the most often, and I'm sure you do too. It's like, hey, what's Josh Allen like? And I always say, he's a nice guy. Really appreciate, I say working with him, even though we're not working with him, but you know what I mean? Like just having a working relationship with somebody of that caliber. And the way that he handles himself, the most impressive thing to me is what he's able to do around kids and people who look up to him. To me, always is check mark. If you do that, I feel like you deserve the praise. You deserve all of the credit that you're getting. That video that the Bills posted was unbelievably well done. And I do think that he means so much to this community that I'm glad that was showcased in the way that it was.
Yeah, for sure. And in case people didn't see it, the Bills have it on their Twitter feed. It's the Oshai Children's Hospital and the kids and, the kind of telling him he's the MVP, right, in their own way, which is really cool. A couple things just to wrap on this, and then you can move on to your next topic. So next year becomes kind of about a few things, right? Which is Josh is chasing tying Mahomes and Lamar for 2 MVPs,
Yeah,
right?
it's crazy.
I mean, it's really going to be interesting. That will be a lot of the talk next year. A couple storylines next year. Josh is chasing that. He's also, if the Bills go to the Super Bowl, it's Josh Allen playing in Northern California. Like this is a big storyline next year. I think that Josh Allen, if he's able to get the Bills to the Super Bowl in his hometown, essentially right nearby, he's from Fireball, but it's in Northern California, San Francisco, kind of in the shadows of where he basically grew up. And then of course, there's the big elephant in the room, which is, can the Buffalo Bills or any other team, but especially the Bills, stop the Chiefs from breaking the unbreakable Bills 4 straight Super Bowl record? Right. That is a huge, huge NFL storyline next year.
Yeah, that's the huge storyline next year. But could you imagine? I didn't even think about this, but my colleague Michael Schwartz posted it after the game yesterday. He's like, my prediction is the Bills go to the Super Bowl. It's 135 miles away from where Firebaugh is. So obviously Josh's hometown would be very close. It would be a hometown trip. But also, if they were to win the Super Bowl, that would mean they're raising the banner in the first ever game inside the new stadium, which is an unbelievably wild thing to think about, because it also makes the risk reward that's already so great. Imagine a playoff game next year in Orchard Park. If they win, their Super Bowl dream is alive. If they lose, they never play another game in that stadium again. You imagine if it's Bills Chiefs AFC Championship in Orchard Park next year, and if you win, you go to the Super Bowl. If you lose, the Chiefs are going for the 4th straight time.
Oh my God.
And you never play another game inside Highmark Stadium. Like that is, you want to talk about like layers. There are
my God.
You got to get there, right?
Yep,
like nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. But, I think about what Brandon Beane said at his end of the year press conference. If you could sign up right now for the Bills down 3 points with 3 minutes left in the ball, I think every single person would take it, and you just see how it goes. But my goodness, would it be juicy.
Speaking of that, have you devoted any time whatsoever to thinking who the Eagles will open up next year with on Thursday Night Football to start the season?
Yes, Cowboys. I think it's going to be the Cowboys.
Really?
Because, I think the easy thing to do would say Commanders, NFC Championship rematch division. I totally get that. I think because Dak got hurt this year and because they have a new head coach, it's really interesting from both standpoints. And obviously, like Eagles, Cowboys.
Yeah,
such a great rivalry. So to me, that's what I'm thinking. It'll be Eagles, Cowboys Thursday night to start the year. And then I think it'll be Bills, Ravens, Sunday Night Football, and then Monday Night Football will probably be some weird doubleheader of like Commanders, Giants, and then like Bengals, Steelers or something.
Well, I'm not disagreeing. I think the Cowboys are a very, very logical choice. However, I did some research today. The last time a divisional opponent was in that game, 2012.
Really?
Yes. They've not had 2 divisional teams in that spot since 2012. The year after the Giants won the Super Bowl with the Patriots, it was Giants Cowboys. They had that game on a Wednesday. I think there was maybe a convention or something going on. The game was on a Wednesday, but since then it's never been a divisional game.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, well, we got schedule time. We got time to talk about the schedule.
We're gonna take a note. Let's ask Mike North. Do they think about the divisional aspect of it when they do that?
All right, we will. All right, the other big news of the weekend, and we'll kind of close out with this. Matt Smiley moving out. That's according to Tom Pelissero of NFL Network, that the Bills have parted ways with Matthew Smiley. Literally less than 2 weeks ago, Sean McDermott said that he planned on him. The exact language was, he was asked by Matt Perino, do you plan on Matt Smiley being your special teams coordinator next year? He said yes. So obviously we all thought that was going to be the case. He changed his mind. Initial thoughts on the change of mind and kind of where they go from here.
Okay, so this tells me one of two things, maybe both. That at the initial thought, yes, right, haven't done the evaluation. This is what happens a lot of times. The Bills, throughout McDermott's tenure, when they have moved on from a coach, there hasn't been a lot of fanfare, right? We know that. It's not like they fired this guy. It's been more we learn about it later in some capacity. I don't think they like doing that stuff from a more of a PR standpoint. They kind of just they kind of do it in the background. It's happened. They move on. It's quiet, and then you move on. And I think Sean probably, with every intention, planned on that day having Matthew Smiley back, but he also probably planned on still evaluating everything. So he gets together with Brandon Beane and their entire staff and the front office and his coaching staff and whoever. And they talk about it and they realize, you know what? We just have to go in a different direction. That's one part of it. The other part is, Matt, what this tells me is could very well be someone out there that Sean said, I just got to have this guy. I'm sorry. And I think we'd both agree. He really does genuinely like Matthew Smiley a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not platitudes when he talked about Matthew Smiley. So I think this probably hurts Sean a lot to have to move on from him. This is a business and it probably does, but this tells me maybe there's a guy out there that Sean goes, I really want to get this guy and I got to do this right now.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know who that is though.
Yeah. And if that's the case, it's not like Matthew's, the fact that we were asking about his future status probably shows that he was somebody who is at least a fringe person to move on from. And if there is somebody else out there, it makes total sense to go and get your guy. Or if they just had the evaluations and they were like, listen, this is an area that has been a problem and we need to try and improve this, then I have no issue with that conversation happening also. And I totally understand it. So I'm not surprised. I guess I'm surprised that it happened, but logically it makes a lot of sense that this is the direction that they are trying to go. So now we have to figure out who are they trying to get? Who do they ultimately replace him with? But that wasn't the only coaching kind of update. We also saw once again, I believe from Tom Pelissero put out there that Denny Kellington is going to the Carolina Panthers. So just from a human standpoint, shout out to him because obviously very, very important person in Bills history these last couple of years and deserves an expanded opportunity for sure.
Denny Kellington is a terrific human. And of course, he is very much credited as part of the team that helped save Damar Hamlin's life when he collapsed in Cincinnati a couple of years ago. Denny, he worked prior to the Bills. He worked at Syracuse University. And I've gotten to know Denny just over the years through our talks about Syracuse. I know he still follows the programs there. Great family, great human, great person. He's done a great job with the Buffalo Bills. But if anybody's wondering why this would happen, his title with the Bills was assistant athletic trainer. He's now going to be hired as a vice president of the Carolina Panthers player health and performance. Now, look, that's also where there's, former Bills over there. Dan Morgan is over there. He knows what Denny Kellington is all about. So obviously that's, a great opportunity for him.
Yeah, for sure. So good for him. And then the only other bit of news was Mike Pellegrino. So big day for Italians on Sunday. With let me
get the exact person who's tweeting this, because there's been nothing from the Bills on this. This is Matt Zenitz, who writes for CBS Sports and 247 Sports. So I'm going to roll with it. He says the Bills are expected to hire former Patriots cornerbacks coach Mike Pellegrino. He worked the last 10 seasons for the Patriots, including the last 6 as cornerbacks coach. Now, interesting. It appears the Bills are losing Scott Booker, their nickel coach, to the Patriots. This is like literally a coach for coach trade. If Pellegrino, I'm assuming, is taking over that role. But the more interesting part to this is, for me, on the heels of, there was a guy from the Jaguars whose name escapes me, the Bills brought in as a senior defensive assistant reporter.
Senior assistant, yeah.
On the heels of that, it appears another coach that has a pretty extensive background in man-to-man coverage.
Yeah.
And I wonder if we're seeing a philosophical shift that's right in front of our eyes through the coaching staff, which eventually will be with obviously what the Bills do on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes you wonder if the personnel decisions that they make moving forward are going to reflect the new style of football that they want to play. Now, obviously, that wouldn't be like a huge emphasis when we're talking about defensive line additions, but when you have to figure out what are you doing with Russell Douglas? What are you doing with the cornerback position? What are you doing with the safety position? Does Cole Bishop immediately slot in? How are you going to approach this? So they've got a lot of things that they need to do, but it sounds like you had Evan Lazar on, right?
Who covers
the Patriots, and it seemed like a lot of people really like Pellegrino.
Oh, it sounds to me like he'll fit a lot of, the culture, I guess, of, the Bills and their coaches. But yeah, he said that he's really a genuine guy. In fact, after I had Evan on, he literally texted me and said, I'm not lying about Mike Pellegrino. He's a great dude. Like, you guys will love him there. He's a, why he started on Belichick's staff, former lacrosse guy. Cross sports. Yeah. Belichick, wherever he played lacrosse, Holy Cross or something. I don't even know where it was. I have to go back and look. But anyway, that's how he ended up on his staff essentially.
All right. Well, a lot of news on this random.
Johns Hopkins, by the way, is where he went to.
The most Johns Hopkins and Duke and Syracuse, the most lacrosse schools that you can think of. So a lot of news on this random little Monday episode that we're doing here, but I'm glad we were able to get it in because obviously the Super Bowl is now done. The offseason has officially started. Josh Allen is the MVP. Sal is going to take a vacation next week, I believe. So we'll probably do one more episode before then. We'll have a couple other guest hosts who join me for, Sal's vacation, rightfully so. So anything you want to say to close out, or
No, I think we're all good. Who knows? The NFL news can happen at any time this time of year. So make sure you're subscribed to the pod, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel at Sal Sports as well.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Mike, Robbie, thank you to our producer. Thank you to all of those who have listened and watched over the course of the season. We are now officially in the off season. That does not mean the episodes are going to stop. We'll keep content churning and coming your way. Thanks for listening and watching to another episode. It's always Game Day in Buffalo.